Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through our source material today because we are unpacking a truly chilling narrative. We're looking at an urban legend from a picturesque mountain town, and it's centered entirely around the dark, lingering shadow of an abandoned primary school. It's just a fascinating look at how local lore is built and how certain spaces really seem to hold on to their dark histories. I'm going to take you through the events exactly as they were recorded. We'll break down the timeline, the tragedy, and the terrifying encounters that honestly keep this legend alive today. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's unravel this mystery together.
So to really wrap our heads around the story, we first have to understand the setting because the contrast is just staggering. Our source material describes this mountain town enveloped in white fog, smelling of pine and wet soil. And right at the center of it all is this massive, incredibly lively residential complex. On one hand, you have this beautiful, idyllic scene. 5 large apartment buildings, a sparkling central fountain filled with colorful fish, flower gardens, and the constant, joyful sound of kids playing. But then, right there, at the farthest corner of that exact same complex, sits this decaying, old, one-story primary school. The paint is peeling, the windows are choked with dust, and is totally surrounded by rusted wire fencing. Most notably, though, the massive iron gate is secured with this remarkably heavy chain. It's been abandoned for years. Nobody talks about it, nobody tells stories about it, but absolutely no one goes anywhere near it after dark. And you've got to ask yourself...
All right, part 1, a night shift nightmare, Rohit's discovery. Okay, let's dive into this by introducing the catalyst of our narrative. Meet Rohit. He's a village boy who recently scored a job as a night security guard for this massive, beautiful, yet kinda subtly unnerving residential complex. He'd been desperately searching for work due to his family's poor financial condition, and that's what brought him to this mountain town. Now, usually, the night shift consists of 3 guards patrolling together. But on one particular night, circumstances perfectly aligned to leave Rohit completely isolated. It's around 2 a.m. The complex is dead silent. One guard is on leave, and the other had to rush home to take care of his sick wife. So Rohit is all alone, armed with literally nothing but a flashlight and a stick. As he patrols near the edge of the property, with the cold wind swaying the trees, he gets close to that abandoned school for the very first time. And that's when he hears it, a distinct rustling sound, like something or someone is moving around inside the chained-up building. Thinking it might just be a stray dog or maybe a trespasser, Rohit bravely, but maybe a little foolishly, steps toward that heavy iron gate to check it out. Standing right in front of the rusted gate, Rohit raises his stick and whacks the iron hard. He shouts into the empty darkness, "Who's inside?" His voice just echoes across the empty grounds of the complex. And what follows is honestly perhaps more terrifying than any noise. Absolute suffocating silence. All that rustling, it stops completely. He stands there for a few agonizing seconds, his heart just pounding in his chest, waiting for some kind of response. Deciding it's nothing, he turns around to leave. But whatever is inside isn't quite finished with him yet. The situation abruptly, violently escalates. Out of absolutely nowhere, this fierce, freezing wind begins whipping around him. The rusted doors and dust-caked windows of the school start violently shaking in their frames, just thud, thud, thud. And then the silence is totally shattered. A chorus of desperate, agonizing voices erupts from inside the school walls. We're talking multiple, unseen people screaming together. "Help us! Save us! Don't let it come in!" It wasn't a threat directed at Rohit, you see. It was a plea for salvation from something else entirely. Rohit is just completely frozen in terror. The sheer horror of the encounter hits its absolute peak right here. As those screams echo in the freezing wind, the main door of the school, the one secured tight behind the chain, slowly, loudly creaks open all on its own. From deep within the pitch-black hallway, this bizarre reddish light begins to spill out. And the source text is super specific about this. Rohit actually feels like whatever is in that light is actively trying to pull him inside. The harder he tries to step back, the stronger that pull becomes. Surrounded by countless screams and pleas for help, and enveloped by an unnatural, freezing cold, well, his mind just simply cannot process the terror. Everything goes black, and he faints right there on the grass. Moving on to part 2, the Planchette experiment, uncovering the dark secret.
So Rohit eventually regains consciousness in a local hospital, surrounded by the complex manager and the other guards. He tells them about the entire terrifying ordeal, but instead of shock, he gets this disturbing, collective silence from everyone. They just tell him, look, don't go near that side at night again. But Rohit needs answers. A few days later, after relentlessly pressing an older, reluctant guard, The dark, long-buried secret of that abandoned school is finally revealed to him. Turns out, the root cause of the whole tragedy centers around a planchette. Now, if you're not familiar, a planchette is essentially a method or a device used in seances, specifically designed to summon and communicate with spirits of the dead. According to the old guard, years ago, there were 7 local boys living in the complex. Bright kids, super into science, but also deeply fascinated by the paranormal. During their summer vacation, what started as a casual debate about the afterlife quickly morphed into a deadly serious plan to actually try a planchette experiment themselves. And they needed a quiet, hidden place to do it. You guessed it, they chose the abandoned primary school.
And this brilliantly illustrates the fateful split of their friend group. They secretly unlocked the school, sneaking in with food, speakers, flashlights, and candles. At first, it was just teenage rebellion, right? Playing music, laughing, hanging out. But as the night wore on, the intent shifted. They were really going to do it. At this crucial moment, 2 of the boys felt this deep, overwhelming sense of dread. They got genuinely frightened, warned the others, saying, "Hey, we shouldn't do this," and decided to bounce. The remaining 5 boys, they actually mocked their friends for being cowards. They chose to stay behind in the dark, and that single decision literally sealed their fate.
Let's actually map out exactly how this escalated, based on the timeline from the source text. At midnight, they sneak in, again, just to hang out. But by 2 a.m., the atmosphere totally shifts. The 2 cautious boys have fled, and the remaining 5 are sitting in a circle surrounded by lit candles, loudly and mockingly calling upon the spirits. Initially, they're just laughing and cursing into the void. But then, at exactly 2:05 a.m., the physical environment radically alters. The air inside the closed classroom drops to an ice-cold temperature. The candle flames start aggressively flickering in unison. And then, the heavy wooden school desks and chairs slowly begin scraping and moving across the floor completely on their own. The doors and windows violently slam shut. The seance actually worked.
Which brings us to part 3, the classroom massacre. The entity responds.
Now this is where we hit the most harrowing part of our explainer today. The boys had successfully summoned something from the other side. But as they very quickly realized, bringing an entity into our world is one thing, controlling it is a whole different ballgame. The entity was definitely not there to communicate peacefully. It was there to respond to their mockery. As the furniture moved and the boys sat frozen in panic, a piece of chalk lying in the tray of the classroom's blackboard suddenly lifted itself right into the air. Without anyone touching it, the chalk began dragging across the slate, slowly writing out a single terrifying question for the boys. Why did you call me? Imagine the sheer panic. The boys immediately screamed and scrambled for the exit, but the doors and windows were immovably sealed shut. They were trapped inside the very circle they had created. In the pitch darkness of that locked room, the source describes this horribly distorted female voice echoing off the walls. It didn't even come from one specific direction. It just filled the entire space. The voice answered her own question, stating, "You called me. Now I will leave by my own will." It is such a grim, terrifying promise. The entity was declaring its total autonomy. It was summoned for a game, but it absolutely refused to be dismissed as one. What followed that declaration is a massive tragedy that the town literally covered up for decades. Terrible screams filled the school that night. The next morning, when the 2 boys who had left early finally confessed what they'd done to the frantic parents, the police were called in. They had to physically break down the heavy doors just to get inside. And the scene? It was so gruesome that responding officers actually fainted. All 5 boys had been brutally mutilated, and painted across the classroom walls in the blood of the victims was that exact same promise: I will leave by my own will. Part 4, Trapped Forever, The Lasting Scars. So the crucial point to take away here is the devastating aftermath of this event. This isn't just some spooky ghost story, it's a permanent scar on the face of this beautiful town. It serves as a stark, horrific cautionary tale about the absolute dangers of reckless curiosity and treating the unknown as a mere midnight game. Following the massacre, the town took extreme measures. The primary school was immediately permanently shut down. Religious leaders were brought in, extensive prayers, purification rituals, and exorcisms were performed in a desperate attempt to cleanse the grounds and banish whatever had been let in. But, as the source text makes terrifyingly clear, it didn't work. Even today, decades later, if you walk near that part of the complex late at night, you will hear the weeping, you will hear the frantic screams and the desperate voices begging for help. It strongly implies that the entity didn't just kill those 5 boys, it claimed them. They're eternally trapped inside that decaying building, forced to relive their final agonizing moments over and over again.
Which, brings us right back to our night guard, Rohit.
Having heard the full, unvarnished truth from the old guard, Rohit is just completely done. He doesn't even care about his financial struggles anymore. He immediately quits his job the very next day, packs his bags, and gets ready to return to his village. But on his final night in the mountain town, as he's preparing to leave, he can't help but cast one last glance across the dark grounds toward the school. And right there, staring back at him from the darkness of the second-floor window, are 5 impossibly pale faces. The boys, still there, still watching.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with a thought that absolutely stuck with me from this source material. We started off by looking at that heavy iron gate secured with thick rusted chains. Now, we usually assume locks and chains are meant to keep trespassers out, right? To protect the property. But given the blood-soaked history of this school and that distorted voice promising it would leave only by its own will, you really have to ask yourself, is that heavy chain truly there to protect the innocent people on the outside? Or is the town desperately trying to lock in the entity that is still trapped inside? Thanks for exploring this chilling source material with me today. Let that question sink in, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.